Greetings and salutations, my dearest friends. My name is Samantha, and today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up. I'm going to be talking about the 15 books that I read in January. Hello, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. I really feel like this is my first wrap-up that I've ever done on my channel, like a monthly wrap-up. I've been making booktube videos for a couple years now, and I just hate filming wrap-ups. I don't know why. A little bit of a slower reading month for me, but typically I do read quite a bit each month, and it just seems exhausting to like sit here and talk about every single book that I read. I don't even know if you guys want to like listen to me talk that long. One of my ins of 2024, something that I really wanted to work on, was just being better at reviewing books. Last year I read over 200 books, and I think I talked about half of them on my channel. Maybe even less than that. There are so many books like throughout the year that I read that I never even talk about. I just give like a quick star rating on Goodreads. So I really want to be better at reviewing books and talking about that, even though sometimes I do read some weird shit. Really quick, I want to talk about a favorite of the month and what is really helping me like stay on track on reviewing books, and that is this book journal that I just recently got. This is a book journal from a Canadian brand called Little Inklings. I will leave their website down below. I picked this up because I saw it in one of Tori's reset videos, Novel Life. In those videos, she kind of always shows her planning process, so I asked her where does she get her book journals from, and it was from this brand. This is the Novel Companion Ultra, and it is undated, which is perfect for me. This one tracks 200 books, which is perfect because I felt like all of the other book journals I was seeing like on TikTok and like Amazon, literally one I saw was like 30 books. That ain't gonna cut it, okay? I don't know why it sounds like I'm sponsored by them, but I'm not. I just really love it, and it's keeping me on track with reviewing, so I wanted to kind of share this brand. All right, so in the month of January, I read 15 books. 5 of them were 3 stars, 5 of them were 4 stars, and 5 of them were 5 stars. So overall, a really good reading month. I did track like how I was reading the books as well, and I read 10 ebooks and 5 audiobooks, which means I did not pick a physical book up the entire month of January. This is kind of becoming a favorites video as well, but I just recently got a Kindle Scribe for Christmas, and I love it so much. I also got a Kindle page turner, so my favorite like preferred way of reading is ebooks. The first book was pretty much my first read of the year, and that is Twilight of Embers by Tessa Hale. This was a highly anticipated book for me because I adore Tessa Hale's writing style so much. I was lucky enough to get an e-arc of the ebook and the audiobook, so I kind of read them together. 5 stars. This was my first 5-star of the year. Again, not surprising. I tend to love pretty much all of Tessa Hale's writing. There's a ton of like paranormal, fantasy, why choose romances, and I eat them up like candy. The writing is so fast paced, and I typically finish them in like one day, and this book was no different. So this one is the first book in the Dragons of Embers Hollow series. It is a paranormal dragon shifter, why choose romance. That's everything that I need. So in this book, our heroine has gone through a really tough time in life. Her parents died when she's really young, and she has been alone for a good majority of her life. She is now headed to college to become a doctor. She goes to this college hoping to blend in, live a normal life, and the exact opposite happens. Ends up having a strong connection with quite a few men, and it turns out that she is their fated mate. They are a group of dragon shifters. If you were to read this book, I would highly recommend the audiobook because it is a fully casted audiobook. So each hero has its own narrator, the heroine has its own narrator. It's a trilogy, and I am really wanting that second book like right now. The book I read was a 5-star read. I told you guys we started off the year so strong. It was How to Say I Do by Tal Bauer. To be honest, in the month of January, I was having so much fun filming reading vlogs. So I have reading vlogs of pretty much every book that I'm talking about. I went through a moment of reading almost all of Tal Bauer's backlist. I discovered him last month, like late to December, and fell in love. Pretty much every book that I've read by him has been a 5-star. This one was no exception. He writes these really angsty, deeply emotional male-male romances. This one is a male-male romance. It follows Noel and Wyatt. Character Noel was supposed to get married, but he was left at the altar, and he decides that he is going to go on his honeymoon alone. He really plans to spend the entire week drowning his sorrows at the bottom of a tequila bottle. He ends up meeting our hero Wyatt in the airport and finds out that they're both headed to Cancun. Wyatt's brother is getting married in Cancun. When they get there, the resort staff thinks that they are married since Noel had the honeymoon package. So they end up spending the entire week in Cancun doing all of this coupley stuff together, a little bit of a fake dating, opposites attract, a bi awakening because our hero Noel thinks he's straight, but he's not. A lot of this book is really their personal development as well as the romance, and It hit me in the feels. I adored this one. I was sobbing at 2 a.m. 5 stars, highly recommend, but I recommend any book by Taubauer. The next book that I read was one of my book club picks. I do have a historical romance book club with Jessica from Piece of Books and Christy from Christy Reads a Lot. This was technically our December pick, but we ended up having the live show in January because of the holidays. This one we read Defy Not the Heart by Johanna Lindsey. I typically like Johanna Lindsey's writing, but this one was just okay. I gave it 3 stars. It was a medieval romance. At the beginning of our book, our heroine is trying to like save her family's castle from an invasion, an attack, ends up getting abducted and is going to be like forced to marry someone. So she decides to propose to one of the men that is abducting her because she wants some control over who she is going to be married to. This one was a fun time. I really liked our heroine. She was super independent and super feisty, but it definitely wasn't my favorite Johanna Lindsey book, so I just gave it 3 stars. Talking about book club picks, I'll talk about the next one. We also read this one for the historical Hellions, and it was The Gift by Julie Garwood. Again, this one was a good time. Our hero is actually a pirate in this book, and it has an arranged marriage trope. I really liked the beginning of this book. It was pretty interesting. However, it kind of like tapered out for me. I've read other Julie Garwood books that I have just generally loved more, so I gave this one 3 stars as well. 2 really fun historical romance picks, but definitely not like all-time favorites. The next book was also another 3-star, and that was Catch Me If You Candy by Ellie Alexander. This is the 17th book in the Bake Shop mystery series. I am a huge fan of this series. I have talked about it endlessly. It's essentially my favorite cozy mystery series of all time. Clearly, I like this series if I am 17 books in. So I'll give you a general premise of the Bake Shop mystery series. It follows our amateur sleuth Jules, who lives in a small town in Oregon, a really popular theater group that performs different Shakespeare plays. The entire town is also Shakespeare themed. Heroine Jules is a pastry chef, and she used to work on a cruise line, but was having some struggles, so she makes her way back to her hometown and works at her family's bake shop. And it's a cozy mystery, so each book has its own murder and follows all of the shenanigans that she gets into. This one in particular, I gave it 3 stars. It was not my favorite in the series. I have other ones that I like more, but it was still really fun. I can never imagine ever rating any of these books lowly because I just love Ellie Alexander's writing. I mentioned the Shakespeare Festival is kind of like a big deal. One of the plays, they need like professional dog actors, so like dogs, to perform in the play, and the competition is ruthless. These dog owners are literally doing everything and anything to have their pet be the star. When I mean everything, I mean murder. Murder, darling. Again, it was really fun. I found some of the characters kind of like overly obnoxious, and the plot was just kind of like silly and campy. I still loved it. I don't want you to think like I didn't love this book because I gave it a 3 stars. A 3-star rating is still really good for me. I just am obsessed with so many other books in the series that this one was just okay. But I'm very excited for the next release. I think we're getting it in February. It's called like A Smoking Bun or something like that. Super excited for that release. Another series that I decided to catch up on in the month of January was the Wayward Children series by Shauna McGuire. I have a whole reading vlog. It's quite a long reading vlog where I caught up on the entire series. I talked about all of the books and my favorite books. So I'll leave that down below if you want a more expansive conversation on this series. But in short, I genuinely love Shauna McGuire's writing. The Wayward Children series is a collection of novellas that follows quite an interesting plot. It exists in a world where there are doors to other universes. If you are the right child in the right place, you might find a magical door to another universe. The series all kind of centers around Eleanor's school for wayward children, and this is a school for kids who have experienced alternate realities and different doors and have been thrusted back into the real world and have to learn how to acclimate to society, knowing there are hundreds and hundreds of doors out there. I always struggle to describe this series because I feel like it transcends genres. It's fantastical and whimsical. It also gives like general fiction vibes. It's on the 7th book of the series, so I read the 7th book. It's called Where the Drowned Girls Go. This is mainly Cora's story, who comes from like a water world. She was essentially a mermaid. However, there were some darker parts of her world that she is really wanting to forget. She leaves Eleanor's School of Wayward Children to go to another school called the Whitethorn Institute, and this school is less about healing and more about forgetting. When she gets there, she realizes that there is some evil stuff going on in this school, so she goes on the journey of saving herself, saving the kids at the school, and also kind of like learning what becoming a hero really means. This one does have quite a few trigger warnings. Our heroine was severely bullied when she was young. The series really alternates between being adventure quest books and portal fantasy. This one was more of an adventure book. There's so much going on, so I ended up giving it 4 stars, and I really did enjoy it. The next one I read, the 8th book, was probably my favorite book in the series, and that was Lost in the Moment and Found. This one is kind of a portal fantasy book and can be read as a standalone in the series, which I think is why it's one of my favorites. Follows Nancy, who, when she's really young, her father passes away, so this does have trigger warnings for loss of a loved one. Shortly after, her mother remarries, and she just does not get the best vibes from her stepdad. This one does have trigger warnings for grooming and everything that comes with that. The author does have an author note kind of detailing all of the trigger warnings, so make sure to read that. Before something too terrible could happen, our heroine realizes and recognizes that she is not safe, so she ends up running away from home and stumbles upon her door. She gets transported to a Nexus world, and this world is where all of the lost things go. It's also a little bit of a market, but what's really interesting about this world, it has access to hundreds and hundreds of doors. Heroine is able to travel to all of these different worlds and doors. Follows her journey as she gets older and kind of loses some of that childlike innocence. It's heartbreaking. I definitely was crying throughout a good portion of this book, but it was also just so beautifully written. I really am talking about these books way too much, especially because I have a whole reading vlog for them. So I'm going to quickly wrap up the last 3 books in the series. So I read book 9, which is the most recently released. It's called Mislaid in Parts Half Known. This was a continuation of Cora and Ancy's stories, the 2 characters that I mentioned in the last 2 books. It's a continuation, like, adventure book, and I did like it. I gave it 4 stars. I also realized that this series had some shorter novellas. They're very, very short. I kind of feel silly for, like, including them in my Goodreads goal, but I read them, so I'm including them. I read In Mercy Reign, which is book 7.5. This is a continuation of Jack's story. You meet Jack and Jill, who are twins. They come from a land called the Moors, which is a land full of vampires and werewolves. Really do get to know so much about them throughout the series, and this is just like an additional novella. I gave it 4 stars. I read Skeleton Song, which is Christopher's story. He comes from a land called Mariposa, which is essentially like an underworld land full of these skeleton creatures. Very much gives Coco vibes. I personally love Christopher. He's one of my favorite characters in the series, and I also gave this one 4 stars. All right, so the last couple books that I read were some Omegaverses. I did a reading vlog this month, which was a collab with my friend Kija. She's my Omegaverse twin. We both are obsessed with Omegaverse, so we decided to read a bunch of those books. First one is Good Boy by Jet Masterson, the second book in the Vanilla Baby trilogy. Essentially, this is a sugar baby, sugar zaddy romance. Is also a male-male romance. One of our heroes is a broke college student. He finds out about this agency that matches people with sugar zaddies, and that's what he does. He finds himself a hot, rich, and dominant alpha, and they are the perfect matches for each other. They balance each other out so well, but obviously real feelings develop. This is a trilogy, and each book is exceptionally long, okay? Each book is like 600 pages. Yeah, I've read 1,200 pages in this series so far from book 1 and 2, and there's still a 3rd book. So it's very, very low angst, high steam, centers mainly around like Omegaverse dynamics. So if you're not familiar with Omegaverse or you don't really like that subgenre, this wouldn't be the series for you. And I struggle to recommend it because it's so low plot. Like nothing is really happening. It's really just following our characters' chemistry. But I love it. I kind of eat it up. Jet Masterson, his writing reminds me of like Wattpad in the best way. So I personally love his books, but I don't know if I would recommend them to everyone. Either way, I gave this one 3 stars. The other Omegaverse that I read was Nobody's Darling by Sarah Blue. This is the first book in her Dead Palm series. An Omegaverse, why choose MC a romance? So our heroine is kind of like the princess in this motorcycle club. Her stepfather is the president of this motorcycle club, and he's not that great. Our heroine is an Omega, and his goal is to marry her off to the richest pack. However, our heroine does not want to do that. She grew up in a motorcycle club and she wants to stay in that life. She wants a man that's a little alpha, a little possessive, a little dork. Our heroine's main goal is to convince her family to let her stay in this motorcycle club, and she ends up having a connection with some of the men in the club. Pretty taboo and forbidden because one of the alphas that she has a connection with is her stepbrother. Yeah. I like this one. It was a little bit of a darker Omegaverse. Definitely like touch her and you'll die vibes. So if you like possessive heroes, you're gonna love this one. I personally love Sarah Blue. She writes a ton of Omegaverse that I really enjoy. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. All right, the last 3 books were by the same author, Marina Vivancos. Marina Vivancos is an author on Kindle Unlimited. She writes predominantly queer romances, and I love her. I read 3 books in her Alpha Omega series. 2 of them were rereads, and 1 of them was like the newer release. I love the series so much, so when I saw that she was adding another book in the series, I wanted to reread the first 2 books. It's called the Alpha Omega Hockey series. It is exactly how it sounds. It is male-male hockey romances set in an Omegaverse universe. So I'm going to quickly wrap these up because I have talked about these books a lot. I have a whole reading vlog on it. The first one that I reread was Fresh Ice. This one is a friends to lovers romance. Our 2 characters are entering into their rookie year. They end up becoming roommates. Our heroes is hiding a pretty big secret, and that is he is an Omega playing hockey, which is an alpha dominated sport. So he's trying to hide the fact that he's an Omega. His best friend and roommate finds out and decides to kind of help him with his heat. I love this one. Both of our characters are like cinnamon rolls. Super cute. I gave this one 5 stars. Obviously, I give everything Marina Vivancos writes 5 stars. The next one I read was Face Off. This one is an enemies to lovers romance. Those are 2 characters who are captains of rival hockey teams, and I gave this one 5 stars. And then the most recent release was Broken Ice, and this one is an opposites attract romance. One of our heroes is an Omega, and he has kind of experienced some prejudice because of his destination. He ends up getting traded from his old hockey team to a team that he is not entirely certain is going to accept him. He gets there, he's really nervous because there is an alpha on the team that he thinks does not like him, but really it is a little bit of a misunderstanding. It ends up following their romance, and I loved it so much. I also gave it 5 stars. I adore this series. I think I got all of them. I don't think I missed any. I hope you guys enjoyed this longer video. Please let me know what was your favorite read of January in the comments down below. If you stayed this long, what are we gonna put? I had 5 stars, which is that's a pretty good month. So let's put some stars in the comments down below if you stayed this long. Okay? Bunch of stars. All right. I love you guys. Thank you for taking time out of your day to spend time with me. It means the world to me. I hope you guys are all staying happy and healthy, and I will see you in my next video.